For 3 long years, the billionaire sheikh stood motionless at the edge of the marble balcony, the vast desert unfolding beneath him like an endless sea of silence. Not a single touch had crossed the emptiness between him and the woman he was bound to by title, yet separated by walls built of pride and cold resentment. Tonight, his voice broke the quiet, but it was neither apology nor tenderness. "I will no longer tolerate this void," he declared, eyes burning with a fire that unsettled even himself. The emirate shimmered under a moonlit sky, its opulence rivaled only by the unforgiving desert beyond. Gold-gilded pillars glittered like stars inside the palace, while rich aromas of amber and sandalwood curled through the corridors. Silk drapes rustled softly in the night breeze, concealing whispers and secrets as ancient as the dunes outside. This was a kingdom of power, wealth, and unspoken rules. Yet within its heart lay a marriage hollowed by silence and distance. Inside the grand hall, the billionaire sheikh carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken regrets. His posture was rigid, commanding, and yet beneath the dark intensity of his gaze flickered a storm of doubt and longing. Every coin of his fortune could not buy back the warmth lost over years of silence. Across the room, his wife remained poised, arms folded, her proud chin lifted high, but with eyes that gleamed like a desert rose fighting to bloom in arid soil. She endured his absence with a quiet strength that masked a burning loneliness. Between them lay a chasm forged by 3 years of cold glances and empty words, each day a battleground of pride and resentment. The billionaire sheikh, once distant and unreachable, now stood on the brink of reclaiming what time had frayed. His voice, low and heavy, cut through the thick tension. "No longer will I be a stranger in my own home." A tension crackled in the air, brief exchanges packed with charged silence. His gaze locked on hers, demanding obedience, seeking forgiveness, testing the fragile truce. She met his challenge without retreat, an electric current pulsing beneath their restraint. The silence spoke volumes of pain, of secrets kept, of desires long suppressed. But as the seconds stretched thin, a whispered truth shattered the fragile calm. The reason for their distance was far deeper than pride or anger. The sheikh's closest aide entered abruptly, bearing news that would shake the foundations of their world, a betrayal from within the palace walls, threatening not only their union, but the dynasty itself. The sheikh's jaw tightened, the moment of choice crashing down upon him. His silence was over. The fight for love and legacy had begun. Before the next secret of this opulent emirate unfolds, make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many fates are yet to be decided, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already stirred your curiosity. Tell me in the comments, from which city do you follow this saga, and what twist do you think awaits us? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to continue. Thank you for being with us. The aide's footsteps echoed sharply as he crossed the marble floor, his expression grave enough to fracture the brittle calm that had settled over the palace for years. The billionaire sheikh's eyes, dark and tempestuous, snapped toward the interruption. The room, thick with the scent of amber and sandalwood, suddenly felt colder, like the desert wind that swept the dunes outside, relentless and unyielding. "My sheikh," the aide said, his voice steady, though edged with urgency. "There has been a betrayal, one not of whisper or rumor, but a blade piercing our very walls. Someone close, entrenched within the palace, has conspired against your rule, and it threatens everything." The words hung in the air like a sinister shadow, swallowing the space between the sheikh and his wife. For a heartbeat, silence stretched taut, pulsing with a shared understanding. This was no ordinary crisis. It was a fracture that cut through loyalty and love alike. The sheikh's jaw clenched, muscles twitching with contained fury. His usual cold composure now trembled on the brink of tempest. He looked to his wife, who met his gaze, eyes aflame despite the guarded mask she wore. For 3 long years, walls of ice had separated them. Yet in this moment, the battle for their marriage and their dynasty merged into one. "Tell me everything," he demanded, voice low but fierce, as if the power in his words could reclaim not only the palace, but the heart that seemed so distant. The aide stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Documents have been forged. Allies turned traitors. A plan to usurp your throne is underway, and the web is woven by someone you trust, someone with access to the deepest secrets of the realm." The sheikh's gaze sharpened, his mind racing against the storm inside him. He could see the outlines of the betrayal, like shadows on sand, but naming its source was another matter. Suspicions flickered. Some familiar faces in velvet cloaks, smiles concealing schemes. His wife's hand twitched, clenched at her side, a flicker of defiance sparking beneath her serene exterior. She broke the silence with a voice that was steady, but laced with an uneasy vulnerability. "We cannot afford fractures now, not with enemies lurking beyond these walls, and not between us." Her words, though weighted with unease, carried a fierce determination that startled them. "Sheikh." Beneath the surface of pride and resentment, an ember of hope kindled, a chance to rebuild what had been shattered. Yet the wounds of silence ran deep. 3 years of distance had twisted their connection into a fragile truce at best. The air between them held unspoken accusations, and the memory of nights spent apart haunted the walls like ghosts. The sheikh turned, sweeping toward the grand window that framed the endless desert. Moonlight spilled over dunes that shimmered like waves frozen in time, reflecting the turmoil etched inside his soul. The opulence of the palace, the gilded pillars, the rich tapestries, now seemed a gilded cage rather than a throne. "Tell me," he whispered, voice thick with an edge of desperation, "who is the serpent in our garden?" The aide's face tightened, reluctant to name names in the presence of the estranged wife. But the sheikh's dark gaze bore down, a silent command that brooked no refusal. "It is your brother-in-law," the aide confessed, the words striking like a scimitar through the fragile peace. "He has allied himself with outside forces, promising them favor in exchange for power. His ambition knows no bounds, and his loyalty to the family is a lie." The wife's eyes flashed, a complex storm of shock, anger, and disbelief stirring behind their depths. She stepped forward, voice sharp and trembling. "You speak of betrayal as if it is a sudden blight, but I warned you once before. The ambitions lurking in that man's heart run deeper than his veiled smiles." The Sheikh's shoulders tensed, a flicker of regret shadowing his features. Had he been blinded to a danger that wore the face of kin? The pride that once fueled his silence now felt like chains, binding him to past mistakes. "We must act swiftly," he said, voice hardening into steel. "But the question remains, can I trust those who stand closest to me? And can I trust you?" Their eyes locked, two warriors circling in a battlefield where pride clashed with longing. Months of cold war and quiet suffering lay buried beneath those stairs, a fragile bridge still trembling between them. Her answer was a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a blade coated with honey. "Trust is a garden we must rebuild together, or watch it wither to dust." The Sheikh took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking, but still heavy with the weight of unspoken apologies and guarded hope. The moonlight caressed his sharp features, highlighting the flicker of vulnerability he rarely allowed himself. Outside, the desert breeze stirred the silk drapes, as if the night itself held its breath. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the fragile calm, footsteps racing along the hall, shadows darting. The palace walls, ancient and proud, seemed to tighten. As if aware of the storm gathering beneath their beauty, the aide's voice was urgent once more. "There is more. The betrayal is not just political. Someone within this palace carries a secret that could destroy what remains of your family's honor." The Sheikh's eyes darkened, the fire within flaring anew. He turned to his wife, voice barely above a growl. "We have been soldiers in silence too long. It is time to fight, not just for power, but for the future we both still dream of." Her gaze softened, yet resolve hardened. "Then let the truth come to light, no matter the cost." A heavy pause settled. Both knew this was no longer a game of whispers, but a war of hearts and shadows. The moon dipped behind a distant dune. The billionaire Sheikh felt the first crack in his fortress of silence. The battle lines were drawn, but the greatest war would be fought within, between love and pride, trust and betrayal. And somewhere deep within the labyrinth of palace secrets, a hidden figure smiled, knowing the game was about to change forever. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows of the grand hall, casting sharp shadows across the polished marble floor. The tension in the room was palpable, thick as the scent of amber that lingered in the air. The billionaire Sheikh stood rigid, statuesque, eyes burning with a storm unspoken until this moment. The news of betrayal hung between him and his wife, an invisible line charged with suspicion and a fragile hope neither dared voice aloud. His wife's gaze did not waver. There was fire in her eyes, a fierce defiance wrapped carefully beneath layers of measured calm. She was no longer the woman who had silently suffered the distance of 3 long years. Tonight, the weight of secrets and lies had drawn them closer, if only to face the tempest threatening their world. Your brother-in-law, the sheikh whispered, voice low and unyielding. How deep does his treachery reach? Who else walks the shadows with him? The aide swallowed hard, unease flickering across his face as he stepped further into the circle of light. Several trusted advisors have shifted loyalties. Documents forged with such precision that only the highest ranks could decipher the deceit. This conspiracy is no mere rebellion. It is a meticulous strike at the very core of your rule. A cold gust swept through the room as the heavy silk curtains fluttered, as if the desert wind outside itself whispered warnings. The sheer opulence of the palace suddenly felt like the walls closing in, its golden pillars and intricate mosaics unable to shield them from the gathering storm. The billionaire sheikh clenched his fists at his sides, nails digging into the flesh of his palms. He fought the surge of anger threatening to consume his reason, rage at the betrayal, regret at the blindness that had allowed it to grow, and a burning desire to protect all he held sacred, especially the fragile thread still connecting him to the woman across the room. She took a tentative step forward, voice steady but laced with raw urgency. We cannot afford division, not now. If we allow suspicion to corrode what remains between us, we lose not only power but hope. Her words pierced the sheikh's stern facade, the cold fortress of pride beginning to fall under the weight of their shared peril. He wanted desperately to believe her, to rebuild what years of silence threatened to shatter completely. For a moment, their eyes locked, a battlefield where every glance carried unspoken battles. Every breath was a truce, fought beneath layers of pain and longing. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Draw the circle closer," the sheikh commanded softly, voice a mixture of authority and desperation. "Find me allies who remain loyal. We expose the serpent, no matter how venomous." The aide nodded and turned toward the heavy wooden doors, when a subtle movement caught the sheikh's attention. His wife's hands were trembling slightly, a quiet tremor betraying the steadiness she sought to project. He noticed the faintest crease of worry on her brow, the same worry that mirrored his own. "Do you trust me?" he asked quietly, almost a whisper, yet it shook the silence like thunder. Her jaw clenched, and for a heartbeat, the vulnerable facade cracked, revealing a flicker of doubt. "Trust is earned," she said, her voice barely audible but resolute. "And right now, it's our most precious weapon." The sheikh stepped closer, the space between them vast yet charged. His usual command softened for the first time in years. Vulnerability dripping beneath the veneer of power. "Then teach me to earn it, before the night devours what little light we have left." Outside, the desert wind howled softly, an ancient lament curling against the towering palace walls. Suddenly, a sharp rap echoed through the hallway beyond. The aide paused, eyes narrowing in suspicion, as footsteps approached swiftly. The atmosphere shifted, tense, alert, as anticipation prickled their skin. The door creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in midnight black, face shadowed, but eyes gleaming with urgent news. "My sheikh," the newcomer breathed, voice low but urgent. "There is a matter you must know, a secret buried in the depths of this palace, one that threatens not only your rule, but the very soul of your family." The Sheikh's eyes darkened to pits of storm as he faced the messenger. "Speak. There is a woman within these walls," the cloaked figure continued, "not of noble blood, but with knowledge that could unmake everything. She carries a truth so dangerous that if it surfaces, the dynasty will crumble." A shiver rippled through the room, silencing all but the distant whisper of the wind against the marble. His wife's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition and dread crossing her face. "Who?" Her voice trembled, torn between fear and determination. The Sheikh's gaze hardened, pain and resolve interwoven like the threads of a silken tapestry. "We will find her, and whatever secrets she holds, they will no longer lurk in the shadows." He turned, cloak billowing like a tempest, the weight of crown and heart heavy yet unyielding. For the first time in years, a spark of fierce purpose ignited within him, the will to reclaim everything lost. As the moon dipped beyond the desert horizon, the grand palace seemed to pulse with secrets ready to unravel. The war for power had begun anew, but deeper still was the battle for love, trust, and redemption. And buried deep in the darkness of the palace's heart, unseen eyes watched and smiled. They knew the game was far from over, because some secrets refused to stay silent, and some betrayals cut far deeper than blood. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows across the ornate walls, wrapping the grand hall in a cloak of uneasy silence. The Billionaire Sheikh stood still, his dark eyes piercing the depths of the room, with a tension that had been building for years now. Years spent locked in a dance of silence and unspoken pain. Tonight, the fragile barrier between him and his estranged wife trembled, pushed to the brink by the weight of betrayal unraveling their world. His wife's gaze was unwavering, fiery, resolute, and yet guarded, as if each word might shatter the fragile truce they barely maintained. The accusation hung heavy in the air, a venomous truth that could poison everything if left unattended. "Your brother-in-law," the Sheikh murmured, voice low and harsh, like desert wind cutting through stone. "The serpent in our garden. How long has this poison spread beneath my very feet?" The aide stepped closer, voice steady but dark. "Long enough to entangle several trusted allies, weaving a distrust that could topple your reign. The conspiracy runs deeper than you imagined. Documents forged, messages sent under the guise of loyalty, each a thread in a web meant to strangle your power." The opulent palace, once a symbol of unshakable strength, now felt like a prison closing in. The scent of amber and sandalwood that usually spoke of luxury seemed tinged with something colder, more sinister. The Sheikh's hands clenched into fists, the ivory rings cutting into his skin. Anguish and fury warred beneath his composed exterior. How had he missed this? How had his family's ambition blinded him to the betrayal festering in his own home? Her voice broke the silence, a soft edge of steel, hiding years of suppressed sorrow. "We can't afford to fracture now. Not when our enemies circle like vultures, waiting for weakness. We must be united, or we will fall alone." The words pierced through the thick tension, awakening a flicker of something long dormant in the Sheikh's heart. A glimmer of hope, fragile yet relentless. Their eyes locked, an electric current sparking in the space between pride and longing. Two warriors, scarred by time, yet unwilling to surrender completely. He took a breath, the weight of silence collapsing as he whispered, "Tell me who else walks this shadowed path. I need to know every face that wears the mask of loyalty, but hides a dagger." The aide hesitated, then lowered his gaze. Several council members, hand-picked for their proximity to your rule. Some allies have become strangers, trading allegiance for ambition. But one name weighs heaviest: the palace's trusted chambermaid, Zaina. A cold shiver traced the Sheikh's spine at the name. Zaina, the unassuming woman who moved silently through the halls, unseen yet always present, a shadow in the corridors. She carries secrets beyond her station, the aide explained. Whispers say she holds knowledge that could ruin your family's honor. Many have underestimated her, but the danger is real. His wife's eyes darkened. I feared as much. The lowest ranks often see the deepest truths, whether we choose to hear or not. A bitter taste settled on the Sheikh's tongue. The walls around him were crumbling, riddled with cracks born of deception and silence. He turned, pacing toward the balcony, overlooking the endless desert, the cold night air brushing his skin like a whisper of forgotten promises. The dunes stretched infinitely, a sea of sand that mirrored the vast chasm between them, a distance forged not only by pride, but by secrets unfolding under the palace's gilded roof. His voice, when it returned, was rough with emotion. We have waited too long to face these shadows. Tonight, the game changes. We root out the traitors, no matter what cost. She stepped beside him, just close enough to feel the heat of his presence, a reminder that beneath the armor of power lay a man vulnerable and desperate. And what of us? Can this fractured bond survive the storm? His stare softened momentarily, the harsh edges giving way to a flicker of regret and yearning. If the price of reclaiming my throne is the rebuilding of trust with you, then so be it. A heavy silence fell, filled only by the night's distant call, the haunting cry of desert owls mingling with the pulse of something ancient stirring in the palace. Suddenly, footsteps shattered the stillness, swift, purposeful, urgent. The heavy doors swung open, revealing a young messenger, breathless and pale. "My sheikh," the messenger gasped, voice trembling. "There is news from the stables. Something unnatural has been found, a sign that someone within the palace grounds is watching us, waiting." The sheikh's eyes narrowed, darkening with the fire of a gathering storm. "Details." The messenger swallowed hard, fighting to keep composure. "A discarded amulet with your family crest, but marked with a foreign symbol, the warning of an old rival clan." The enormity of the revelation crashed upon the room like an avalanche. The palace walls, rich with history and secrets, now seemed fragile, vulnerable to the venom of betrayal and the ghosts of old enmities. His wife's breath caught, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. This is no longer just a battle for power. It's a war in shadows that threatens all we hold dear. The sheikh's jaw clenched, his mind racing through endless possibilities, plotting defenses in a game where every piece could be lethal. He turned toward his wife, voice low but resolute. "We must act as fractured rulers, but as a force reborn. The palace will be purged of lies and poison, and perhaps, in its ashes, we will find the truth that sets us free." Her gaze met his, steady and filled with rare softness. Together then, no more silence. As the moon slipped beneath the horizon, a fragile alliance formed in the chill of dawn, between two hearts, long estranged, but bound by the unyielding ties of duty and love. Yet deep within the labyrinthine corridors, unseen eyes watched, a shadowed smile curling like a serpent's fang. The game was shifting, and the greatest betrayals were yet to be revealed. The grand hall's shadows stretched long and restless as the midnight visitor's heavy words echoed off the marble. A secret woman, a threat lurking within the palace walls. The billionaire Sheikh's gaze darkened, storm clouds gathering behind his stern facade. He turned slowly from the looming window, the endless desert a silent witness to his unrest. Each grain of sand seemed to whisper of threats unseen, alliances broken, and truths buried beneath layers of loyalty and deception. His wife's eyes, wide and glistening in the soft moonlight, pierced the gloom with a fierce urgency that belied the fragile peace they barely upheld. The name of the mysterious woman hung unspoken between them, yet the weight of its danger tethered their hearts in an uneasy alliance. "Who is she?" His voice was a mere breath, a thread of steel trembling in the velvet night. The midnight-cloaked messenger stepped forward, hood slipping just enough to reveal sharp eyes flickering with cautious resolve. Her name is Layla, a servant of no noble blood, but keeper of a secret so dark it could dissolve the pillars of your dynasty. The Sheikh's jaw clenched, tension rippling through his rigid frame. Memories of whispered rumors, glances avoided, and shadows lingering where sunlight failed flooded his mind. A servant, and yet a threat, far greater than any golden prince wrapped in arrogance and silk. His wife took a trembling step forward, voice trembling but unwavering. "I have seen her in the corridors, silent and watchful, moving through spaces where no one dares speak her name. There is something in her eyes, a quiet fire, a hunger for truth's most fear." The Sheikh's breath hitched, a storm raging beneath the surface. How many times had he ignored the faint signs, the subtle shifts beneath his opulent command? The velvet curtain of power began to tear, revealing wounds festering with betrayal. "We must confront her," he declared, voice low but unyielding. "Before the palace falls, before the serpent strikes again." His wife nodded, the years of silence dissolving into fragile hope. "Together," she whispered, a promise tangled in pain and longing. The silence that followed was thunderous, filled with the ghosts of forgotten nights and unspoken apologies. The air thickened, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine and the sharp metallic tang of impending battle. Steps echoed again, lighter this time, cautious yet deliberate. A third figure emerged from the shadows, a young woman, her robes modest, eyes fierce beneath a crown of dark curls. Layla. The name tasted bitter on the tongue of the palace's rulers. The Sheikh's eyes locked onto her, a tempest of command and curiosity. "Speak," he demanded. Layla's voice was steady, carrying the weight of secrets kept too long. "My loyalty is not bound by birth or title," she said, "but by truth, and the truth I carry threatens to crumble the throne you sit upon." A palpable pulse of tension vibrated through the room. The wife's hands clenched at her sides, fingers digging into silk folds, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve. "Our family has guarded lies as fiercely as treasures," Layla continued. "Some buried deep beneath the sands of time, others hidden in the very blood that flows through these halls." The Sheikh took a step forward, the imposing shadow of his presence folding over the fragile figure before him. "Why reveal this now?" "Because the enemy within moves faster than the desert sands," Layla replied, eyes shining like polished onyx. "And if the truth remains buried, every stone in this palace will crumble beneath the weight of its own deceit." His wife's gaze softened, a flicker of empathy cutting through the thick fog of suspicion. "We are no strangers to betrayal," she murmured. "But this could undo all we have fought to build." The Sheikh looked between Layla and his wife, torn between the cold logic of a ruler and the fragile hope of a man desperate to reclaim what had been lost. Not only power, but love. "Tell me everything," he ordered, voice low and charged with urgency. Layla nodded, stepping further into the light, revealing a document bound by crimson thread. "A ledger," she began, detailing alliances made in shadow, pacts forged with rivals beyond our borders, names long thought loyal, now stained with treachery. The room seemed to shrink as each word fell like a stone. The woman who had endured years of silence, the ruler whose heart had hardened beneath opulent walls, and the servant who dared to unearth the darkest truths, all stood at a crossroads where trust was brittle and the stakes deadly. The wife's breath caught, searching in Layla's eyes, a flicker of honesty. "Will this betrayal reach beyond the palace doors?" she asked, voice quivering like a fragile flame in the wind. Layla's gaze was unwavering. "It already has. The scorpion's sting has spread through our allies, whispers of revolt, threats cloaked in friendship. The sands shift beneath your feet." For a suspended moment, the only sound was the desert wind brushing past the window, a haunting lament that mirrored the turmoil within. The Sheikh's hands curled into fists, his voice a harsh whisper carved from steel. "Then we end this, tonight. No more shadows, no more lies." The wife reached out tentatively, her fingers barely brushing his sleeve, a gesture heavy with the weight of years spent apart. "We may be fractured," she said softly, "but perhaps together we can seal these wounds." His eyes found hers, vulnerability peeking through the armor of dominance. "Together," he echoed. Suddenly, a soft crackle broke the fragile peace. A hidden scroll slipped from the folds of Layla's garment, unfurling across the marble floor. The red seal broken revealed a name that struck like a thunderbolt, one they never expected. The whisper of that name shattered the silence like glass. "Your most trusted advisor," Layla whispered, voice barely audible but charged with lethal clarity. The Sheikh's breath caught, gaze narrowing with fierce intent. Trust had been a mirage, betrayal a ravenous desert storm. The war for the dynasty's soul was no longer distant. It was here, and it was only just beginning. The grand hall still echoed with the weight of Layla's revelation, the crimson thread binding the ledger, almost glowing under the moonlight that spilled through the towering windows. The air, thick with jasmine and secrets, seemed to pulse with uneasy energy. The billionaire sheikh stood motionless for a moment, the storm inside him raging as fiercely as the desert wind outside. His fierce gaze never left Layla's steady eyes, a silent challenge passing between them. "Every name on that ledger is a wound in our blood," he murmured, voice low and raw, with restrained fury. "How deep does this poison spread?" Layla's fingers tightened slightly on the edges of the parchment. "Deeper than you imagine. Those who once knelt in loyalty now scheme beneath the very roof you command." Her words hung in the space like a curse, and the sheikh's eyes darkened, the weight of betrayal settling on his shoulders. His wife stepped closer, the silk of her gown whispering against the marble floor, a fragile yet determined presence amid the shadows. Her eyes searched his, not for anger, but for a flicker of the man she had once loved, and still, reluctantly, believed in. "We have no choice but to unravel this web," she said softly, voice laced with urgency that belied her graceful composure. "But it must be done carefully. One wrong move, and everything we fight for crumbles like dust." The sheikh's lips pressed into a thin line. Years of isolation, of mistrust, pressed down on him, a fortress of silence that now threatened to imprison them both. Yet, beneath the hardened exterior, something fragile, almost desperate, stirred. "We shed blood for this dynasty," he whispered, eyes smoldering with a fire born from pain and determination. "I will not let it fall to ruin, not while there is breath in my body." The tension between him and his wife thickened, the space shrinking with every heartbeat. Their fractured past, the years of cold silence, and the bitter distance now hovered between them, like a fragile glass, threatening to shatter or mend. Layla cleared her throat, breaking the charged silence. "There is more. As you asked, the reason the chambermaid has evaded suspicion for so long, it is because she has allies, eyes in every corridor, ears in every shadow." The sheikh's gaze swept the room, the weight of every whispered lie settling like sand in his chest. "Then we begin with silent steps. Seek out the loyal, expose the traitors." His wife's gaze hardened momentarily, her voice gaining strength. "And what of us? What becomes of the trust shattered by years of silence and suspicion?" He turned to her, vulnerability flickering beneath the blaze of his command. "Trust is a fragile thing, but tonight, we begin to reclaim it. For the dynasty, for us." Her fingers brushed his sleeve, a tentative touch that spoke volumes of both apology and hope. In that moment, the bronze hourglass hanging from the grand pillars seemed to hush, the palace itself holding its breath. Suddenly, the air shifted. A subtle movement at the heavy doors echoed through the hall. The sheikh's body tensed, instincts honed by years of power snapping into alert. The doors creaked open, admitting a figure draped in worn leather and desert dust, the captain of the palace guard, his face pale and grave. "My sheikh," the captain said, voice strained but steady. "There has been an attack at the southern gate. Saboteurs took advantage of the night's shadow. They sought to breach the palace walls." A rush of cold certainty cut through the room. The scent of sandalwood now mingled with the harsh tang of impending war. The sheikh's jaw clenched, dark eyes blazing with a fierce storm. "How many were there?" "4, confirmed. They fled into the desert after the guards repelled them. But they left signs, marks of the rival clan you once defeated." A shadow deeper than the desert night crossed the sheikh's face. The wife's breath hitched, her hands clasped tightly at her waist. "The past we thought buried is clawing its way back." His voice, low and resolute, cut through the thick tension. "They test us, our strength, our unity. If we do not stand as one, this palace will fall from within and without." Layla stepped forward, eyes sharp as polished onyx. "I will lead the search for any further conspirators inside the palace. We cannot afford to overlook even whispers of dissent." The sheikh nodded, the leadership settling over him once more. "And I will root out the traitors among my council and guard. There is no place for betrayal under my watch." His wife's gaze softened, a complex blend of pain and resolve surfacing. "Then the war begins, not just of swords and secrets, but of hearts and trust." He reached out, fingers brushing against the back of her hand, tentative, hesitant, yet holding the promise of repair. "This night marks the fracture, but also the forging of our alliance." Outside, the desert wind howled, an ancient call that carried both warning and hope across the dunes. Suddenly, a hushed whisper floated from the shadows. Near the velvet drapes, a voice threaded with malice and mockery, barely audible but sharp enough to draw every eye. "Afraid it's more than just the past coming to haunt you." The figures near the walls stiffened. A chilling laugh echoed quietly, fading into the night. The sheikh's eyes narrowed, a storm gathering behind his gaze. The game was shifting, and the next move would come from shadows none had yet seen. The palace walls seemed to close in tighter as the captain's grave words settled into the air, like a suffocating spell. The southern gate, once believed secure, had been breached in the shadows. 4 saboteurs, armed not only with blades, but with the venom of betrayal, had slipped dangerously close to the heart of the emirate. The scent of sandalwood mingled uneasily with the sharp, metallic sting of impending war. The billionaire sheikh's dark eyes blazed like twin stars trapped under a desert storm. Each breath he drew was thick with fury and resolve. His chest heaved beneath the weight of centuries-old pride and the crushing certainty that his reign, fragile as the glimmering mirage of an oasis, was under siege. "We cannot falter," he growled, his voice low but laden with unyielding command. His gaze turned to the woman who stood resolutely beside him, once distant, now a flickering flame in the vast expanse of his stormy world. Their fractured bond trembled beneath the burden of shared battles and guarded hopes. Her eyes met his, fierce with determination, yet softened by the fragile new threads of trust weaving between them. If the palace is too, remain unbroken, she said, voice steady as the desert sun. Then we must become the shield no enemy can pierce. Together. A reluctant warmth stirred within the Sheikh's chest, mingling with the burning embers of responsibility. Together. The word tasted unfamiliar yet potent, an uncharted path through the ruins of silence. The captain's report was far from over. The marks left by the saboteurs? They belong to the Karam clan, your sworn enemies from the northern dunes. Their hatred runs like wildfire, and this attack is no accident. It's a message. The palace held its breath. The golden pillars, the intricate mosaics, even the flickering torchlight seemed to dim under the shadow of a past long thought buried. The Sheikh's fingers clenched until his knuckles whitened, the weight of generations pressing down on him. Then we answer their message with a storm they cannot withstand. A shifting in the crowded chamber caught his attention. Layla stepped forward, her presence an unlikely yet crucial pillar amid the tempest. The flame in her black eyes sharpened. I will gather my network within the palace walls. Whispers have already reached ears loyal to you. Tonight, the hunt begins for those who wear false faces. The Sheikh inclined his head, an unspoken vow of allegiance. His wife moved closer, the silk of her gown whispering secrets to the marble floor. And what of the shadows within? Those who have played their parts unseen, but whose knives remain poised. Can we root them out without shredding what remains of our fragile alliance? His hard gaze softened, vulnerability tattooing his stare. I do not know if the palace will survive their unmasking, but it will not survive another night under the spell of silence and lies. A heavy pause fell between them, stretched tight as the desert sky before a sudden storm. The doors opened abruptly, and a hushed wave of whispers rippled through the gathering. A figure emerged from the threshold, a messenger swathed in the midnight cloak of secrecy. His face was pale, eyes haunted, bearing news that chilled like a sudden desert frost. My Sheikh, the messenger breathed, voice trembling as if bearing the weight of doom itself. A message has been intercepted, one meant for your brother-in-law. The room stilled. The name that had poisoned trust for so long hung in the air, thicker than the incense drifting through the vast hall. The Sheikh's jaw clenched, fury and calculation warring beneath his stoic mask. What did they say? The messenger's eyes flickered with fear and respect. Plans, secret movements, a coup timed to shatter your reign from within and without. But there was something else, an order to eliminate anyone who stands in their way, including the woman you call your wife. A gust of wind rattled the heavy curtains, as if the desert itself howled a warning. Her breath caught, a fragile, sharp intake that betrayed the steel beneath her poised exterior. For a fleeting moment, shadows in her eyes softened, replaced by the raw truth of vulnerability. The Sheikh's face, carved from stone, cracked imperceptibly. Impossible, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. She took a step forward, voice steady, despite the storm raging in her heart. No alliance forged in silence can resist a blade aimed at its heart. We must fortify more than walls. We must fortify trust. Her words struck like the desert sun after a long night, illuminating the dark corners of his doubts. He turned to her fully, eyes searching. In her, he saw the echo of everything lost and now desperately sought. A chance to rebuild amid the ruins. Their hands brushed briefly, a spark amid the dust and gold. Outside, the desert whispered. Time was running thin. Layla produced a folded parchment, heavy with the stains of secrecy. This map details safe houses and informants. The traitors have spread further than you imagined. The Sheikh studied the lines, tracing the plotted betrayals etched by ambition and greed. We will strike first, quick, merciless. The wife's gaze hardened, but not without caution. We risk becoming monsters in this war. A shadow passed over the Sheikh's features as the weight of command rested once more on his shoulders. We fight not just for power, but for survival, for the family we have torn apart and the love buried beneath. The chamber grew colder as anticipation thickened the air. A silent prayer to unseen forces stretched taut between past sins and future battles. Then, from the depths of the hall, a whispered laugh slithered through the shadows, a sound both chilling and triumphant. The Sheikh's eyes narrowed to burning embers, shadowed by realization. The serpent is closer than we dared believe. And in the flickering candlelight, the faintest movement stirred behind the gilded pillars, an unseen smile that promised the game was far from over. The grand hall remained shrouded in a tense stillness, as if the very air held its breath, waiting for the truth to unravel. The map Layla had revealed was laid bare upon the marble table, its delicate parchment shifting under the flicker of torchlight. Each mark was a wound, a scar of betrayal etched deep into the veins of the palace's legacy. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes traced the treacherous paths, each line a promise of danger lurking closer than he had dared admit. He stepped back, his jaw clenching, as the weight of command settled heavy on his broad shoulders. Outside, the desert night pressed like a silent sentinel against the towering walls, the endless sea of sand, swallowing secrets as much as it revealed them. His wife's gaze found him across the room, a spark of defiance mixed with the fragile warmth that had begun to thaw their frozen years. She moved deliberately, her footsteps soft yet determined, the rustle of silk the only sound beneath the palace's hushed gravity. "We are standing on the precipice," she said quietly, voice steady despite the storm that threatened to consume them. "One wrong move, and all falls apart. Our family, our throne, the fragile hope between us." He nodded, the fire in his dark eyes burning brighter, but tempered by a shadow of vulnerability. "No longer can we afford silence. The traitors feed on it, spreading poison like desert venom. Tonight, every shadow will be illuminated." Their hands brushed briefly as he reached out, a touch hesitant, charged with the ghosts of their past. His voice softened. "We fight not just for power, but for us." She met his gaze, the distance between them shrinking, yet still heavy with unspoken apologies and guarded hope. Layla stepped forward again, her presence sharp and unwavering. "There is more," she said, voice low and urgent. "The chambermaid, Zaina, has deeper connections than we realized. She moves unseen, but her eyes and ears are everywhere. She is the serpent weaving through the palace shadows. The Sheikh's knuckles whitened as he clenched his fists, the betrayal cutting sharper than any blade. "Then we expose her," he declared, voice a low growl that echoed in the vast hall, "and root out every traitor entirely." His wife flinched slightly at his intensity, but nodded. "We must, for if we hesitate, the kingdom will fall as surely as night follows day." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest whisper of movement, an unseen presence watching, waiting. A sudden knock shattered the tension. The heavy palace doors creaked open, admitting the captain of the guard, his face pale under the torchlight. His hurried steps echoed ominously across the marble. "My sheikh," the captain faltered, "there's been an attack at the southern gate. Saboteurs struck under cover of darkness. 4 managed to breach before guards repelled them. They fled into the desert, but left signs of the Karam clan." The sheikh's gaze darkened, old grudges twisting beneath the surface. "So the past claws its way back from the dunes," he murmured, the cold desert wind seeming to seep through the opulent walls. His wife's fingers clenched, the fragile hope in her eyes stealing into iron determination. "Then the war is no longer just whispers and secrets. It is blood and fire." The sheikh's voice, steady as the mountains framing the horizon, cut through the heavy air. "We will meet fire with fire. This palace will not fall, not while I draw breath." Layla nodded. "I will organize the search for all conspirators. No corner of these walls will hide treachery." Their alliance, tentative but vital, wove itself stronger as daylight faded from the sky. Together, they turned toward the shadows, humming with silent threats, their fragmented pasts converging into a singular, urgent purpose. Yet across the room, folded beneath the heavy hems of silk drapes, a subtle movement stirred. A shadow detached itself quietly, slipping away, with a smile curved like a scimitar's edge. And in that smile lay a promise, a secret yet untold, a betrayal poised to strike when trust seemed most fragile. Because in a palace built on power and lies, the deadliest weapons are those wielded in shadows, and the greatest game has only just begun, for the first time in years. The grand hall felt charged not with silence or suspicion, but with the promise of reckoning. The billionaire Sheikh's gaze, once stormy and distant, now blazed with clarity and purpose. Before him lay the map and ledger, revealing the betrayal that had seeped like poison through the veins of his empire. Yet, beyond the weight of treachery, there flickered a fragile hope, a chance to reclaim not only his throne, but the love that had been buried beneath walls of pride and years of silence. His wife stood resolute beside him, her eyes no longer veiled by resentment, but glimmering with trust reborn. The delicate touch of her hand against his sleeve spoke volumes beyond words. It was an unspoken vow to face the coming storm together, as allies, as equals, and as a man and woman bound by destiny more than duty. "We will root out this serpent," he declared, voice steady, yet laced with the raw edge of battle-hardened resolve. "No shadow will hide in this palace tonight." The chambermaids, the trusted advisors, the close confidants, every corner was swept for whispers, every gaze weighed for hidden agendas. Layla led the charge with fierce precision, moving through the corridors like a shadow possessed by truth, her fierce eyes piercing every veil of deceit. Hours passed as the palace breathed under siege. The grand corridors that had once echoed with hollow silences vibrated now with the impending confrontation. When at last the chambermaid Zaina was brought before the throne, her cool defiance could not mask the tremor of inevitability. The Sheikh's voice cut through the silence like desert lightning. "You have betrayed your blood, your honor, and the sanctity of this home. Speak your final words." Zaina's gaze flickered, the web of lies unraveling beneath the thunder of justice. "I was but a pawn, a weapon in a war far older than you know. But if this palace falls, it will not be by my hand alone." Her confession fractured the room like shattered glass, revealing layers of conspiracy far deeper than expected. Yet within the storm of treachery, a steadfast truth anchored the Sheikh's heart, the love for the woman who had stood beside him through storms both silent and violent. In the days that followed, purge and redemption unfolded side by side. The conspirators were exposed, their plots disarmed, and the dynasty's throne fortified not just by power, but by an alliance rekindled in hardship and forgiveness. The palace, once a gilded cage of silence and suspicion, blossomed anew. Gardens long abandoned breathed fresh life beneath the warm sun, vibrant blooms painting the grounds with hues of hope and renewal. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled through the latticed windows, the billionaire Sheikh and his wife stood together on the palace balcony. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast sea no longer of solitude but of promise. He turned to her, eyes soft but unwavering. "For too long we were prisoners of pride and silence. Tonight, I choose hope. I choose us." Her smile blossomed like the desert rose, tough, beautiful, and unbreakable. "And I choose you, not as a title or a bond forced, but as the man who dared to reclaim what was lost." Their hands entwined, fingers threading together the past and the future in a single, unbreakable promise. Behind them, the palace breathed anew, its halls no longer echoing with shadows, but alive with laughter and music, signs of a legacy. Reborn not merely through inheritance, but through love's unwavering strength, the people of the emirate whispered of a new dawn, where power was tempered with compassion, and the greatest ruler was one who had learned to truly lead with his heart. As stars began to prick the velvet night sky, the billionaire Sheikh and his wife sealed their vows not with gold, but with the quiet certainty of a love earned through trials faced and overcome. In that moment, the desert wind carried their whispers across the dunes, a prayer for peace, a pledge of unity, and the forever promise that some loves, like the endless sands, endure beyond time. The storm had passed, the kingdom stood whole, and in their hearts, a love brighter than any star guided the path ahead.